Appalachian folklore. Let's start with a simple fact. The Appalachian Mountains are ancient. I'm talking older than dinosaurs old, older than cities, older than civilization old. These mountains existed when the concept of civilization was basically, hey, let's not die today. And that longevity matters because the myths and superstitions that developed here were not cute bedtime stories. They were survival protocols, transmitted orally over generations in hollers and ridges where getting lost could literally mean you never come back. Appalachian folklore is built on one principle. If something weird happens in the woods, it's because the woods decided it should happen. Not because a creature did it, not because someone is playing a prank, not because physics is being lazy. The woods have intention. The mountains have patience. The rivers have memory. And every living, and maybe not living, thing has a role in enforcing the cosmic rules of the hollers. The people who lived here didn't romanticize these mountains. They respected them. They feared them. And they listened, even to the smallest sound, the whistling of wind through the trees, the hoot of an owl, the snap of a twig where no one should have stepped. Each tiny signal could be a warning. Each shadow could be a messenger. Every animal sighting could be a lesson in etiquette. And by etiquette, I mean life or death protocol. This is not a metaphor. Step in the wrong place, ignore the wrong sign, mock the wrong sound, and the mountain will remind you, usually through inconvenience escalating into disaster, that your assumptions are wrong. Modern humans might laugh at that. Appalachians do not. This is because Appalachia is old. Older than any moral framework, older than modern religion, older than rational human understanding. Survival here depends on reading patterns that are invisible to the casual observer. Miss a warning once, and you might never miss another again. The mountain treats everything as alive. Everything, from a rock to a bird to a gust of wind, has intention. There's no separation between natural and supernatural. A creek that hisses could be water or it could be a warning. A panther that screams could be an animal or it could be a haint, a spirit tied to the mountain that doesn't like your attitude. The Appalachian worldview doesn't rely on labels. It relies on outcomes. Did you survive? Then you followed the rules. Did you fail? Then the rules were clear, you just didn't obey them. And the rules are subtle. They are not, beware the monster that lurks in the forest. They are, don't whistle at night. Mind the right side of the creek. Do not step over the stone that doesn't belong to you. If the whippoorwill calls thrice near your window, do not ignore it. Failure to comply doesn't result in a cinematic death scene. It results in a gradual accumulation of misfortune, small, inconvenient, escalating consequences that teach the lesson without drama. Broken eggs. Lost keys. Ill-timed illness. A dead chicken or two. The mountain has a sense of humor, but it's a slow, meticulous, perfectly patient humor that can ruin your week. Granny women, the Appalachian version of witches, understood these patterns. They were healers, midwives, curse breakers, and omen interpreters. Their knowledge combined practical medicine, herbs, poultices, teas, with spiritual guidance, warding symbols, charms, ritual gestures. If you were sick, the cure might involve willow bark tea and also a salt line across the doorway. If you were cursed, or the mountain was unhappy, a recipe for safety could involve moonlight observation, chants, and offerings of simple foods. The specifics didn't matter as much as the practice itself. Stack everything that might help, and survival chances go up. That's Appalachian logic. Results matter more than explanation. The magic was practical. A rabbit in the trail could be a simple animal, or it could be a witch in disguise. You don't debate. You don't test. You respect it. You leave the area and live to tell the story. Same with whispering sounds in the hollow, strange shadows at sunset, or unexplained bruises on livestock. Interpret correctly, or pay the consequence. The point is, the folklore is a survival manual wrapped in stories. Let's talk about the subtlety of Appalachian warnings. Outsiders often assume danger is dramatic. They think there will be glowing eyes, screams, maybe a monster alert sign nailed to a tree. Appalachians do not work that way. The warnings are delivered casually. A neighbor might say, "I wouldn't wander down past the old mill after dark." Or, "We don't go over that ridge much, never did." Or the deadliest of all phrases, "That's not a place you want to get to foolin' around in." Notice the calm tone. That calmness is intentional. It's not polite, it's precise. It's the human equivalent of a hazard sign that says, "Proceed at your own risk." Seriously. We warned you. And the mountain enforces it. People who ignore the subtle admonitions often find themselves suffering a slow, escalating series of unfortunate events. Livestock dies, crops fail, tools break, minor accidents pile up, dreams turn violent, and sometimes someone mysteriously vanishes. The mountain doesn't need to be dramatic, it simply is. This is a place where pattern recognition is more important than bravery. And make no mistake, failure to recognize a pattern can be fatal. The Appalachian Mountains do not negotiate. They do not warn in terms of consequences. They simply act. And their methods are subtle enough that you may not even notice until you are in too deep. The role of granny magic. Let's dive deeper into the practitioners themselves. Granny women, old witches, mountain healers, call them what you will, were the backbone of Appalachian folk survival. They were the codifiers of superstition into practical, actionable advice. A granny could read dreams as real omens, interpret animal behavior as warnings of incoming danger, know which herbs could heal and which could kill, perform rituals to cleanse a house or ward off unseen entities. And yes, these rituals sometimes looked absurd to outsiders. A salt line across the floor might seem quaint until you realize it was a way to prevent malevolent spirits, or simply the unwanted consequences of a bad omen, from following someone into the home. Apples, mirrors, iron horseshoes, running water, and even the orientation of beds were all part of a survival toolkit disguised as superstition. In modern terms, Appalachians were performing risk management. Every story, every ritual, every warning was essentially a heuristic. Do this, and you might survive. Ignore it, and the odds of misfortune rise dramatically. Animals as messengers. Animals in Appalachian folklore are never just animals. They are messengers, monitors, or even enforcers of the mountain's will. A rabbit sitting in the trail? Maybe a rabbit. Maybe a witch in disguise. Either way, you do not pass. A crow or raven appearing suddenly in your yard could be a harbinger of death. Could be reminding you to take a warning seriously. Owls, whippoorwills, or panthers. Their sounds are messages, not random noise. To survive, one does not need to understand the supernatural mechanics. One only needs to obey. And the Appalachians were meticulous in teaching obedience. It was less about fear of spirits and more about respect for the rules of the environment. Etiquette as survival. This brings us to an important aspect of Appalachian folklore: etiquette. The rules are not formalized like, do not kill, do not steal, in a legalistic sense. They are behavioral protocols meant to keep humans alive in a hostile environment. Examples: don't whistle after dark. Don't step over stones that belong to the woods. Don't mock the hoot of an owl. Avoid certain ridges and hollers at night. These etiquette rules may appear minor, even silly. But violating them leads to small disasters that escalate into bigger ones. The mountain enforces compliance. If you follow the rules, you live. If you ignore them, you pay. Notice the pattern? Appalachian superstition is not ornamental. It's literally survival encoded into stories. These tales are like software patches, applied over generations, designed to prevent catastrophic errors that might cost you your life. The mountains are older than you think. Finally, a reminder. The mountains themselves are older than nearly everything humans worship or fear. 480 million years old. Think about that. The mountains were here before humans, before civilization, before theology, before recorded history. They don't owe anyone a warning, an explanation, or even fairness. The Appalachian folklore isn't fantasy. It's a human attempt to map survival protocols onto a vast, indifferent, ancient landscape. The mountains shape the culture as much as the culture interprets the mountains. It's a symbiotic relationship where understanding, respect, and obedience are literal survival tools. Now, let's get into the fun part. The creatures, spirits, and oddities that make Appalachian folklore, well, Appalachian. Because it's one thing to respect the mountain, and another entirely to know what lurks inside it. Haints are basically the Appalachian catch-all for spirits and ghosts that don't quite fit neat categories. Think of them as the low-effort, high-mischief entities of folklore. Haints can be mischievous, dangerous, or sometimes just plain annoying. A haint can move objects while you sleep, make livestock behave strangely, appear in dreams to deliver ominous messages, whisper in your ear so you wake up thinking you heard your own name called. Here's the kicker. Nobody ever explains why haints do what they do. That's part of the survival strategy. The logic is simple. If a haint does something, assume it's significant. Respect it. Avoid it. Don't ask questions. The mountain doesn't negotiate. Boo hags. If haints are low-effort spirits, boo hags are the relentless kind. Imagine a shape-shifting entity that sits on your chest at night, stealing your breath while you sleep. Sound familiar? That's because people in Appalachia literally explained sleep paralysis centuries before modern science called it that. Boo hags are usually associated with witches who lost their bodies in the afterlife or spirits that never got a proper burial. They can drain your energy, cause nightmares that feel like physical attacks, move between your room and the surrounding woods with terrifying speed. The treatment? Not just sage or crystals. Appalachians advised practical remedies. Sprinkle salt around your bed, keep a fire burning, or wear protective charms. Again, this is risk management disguised as folklore. It's very specific. It's very effective, if you follow the rules. Shape walkers are another delightful category. They are humans or spirits who can change form, often into animals, to manipulate or deceive. This includes wolves that aren't wolves, foxes that may or may not carry messages from the beyond, birds that imitate voices to lure wanderers off the trail. Once again, no one debates whether shape walkers are real. You simply operate under the assumption that any animal could be one. Misidentifying a shapewalker is a rookie mistake, one that could lead to inconvenience at best and death at worst. The Appalachian approach is brilliant in its simplicity. Assume the worst, prepare, and survive. Mountain whispers. Some of the strangest tales revolve around sounds. Whispering winds, murmurs in the trees, rivers that hiss in patterns, these are considered messages. They may convey warnings of approaching danger, the passing of a neighbor or relative, instructions for survival, which trail to take, which creek to avoid. Modern people often laugh at this. It's just the wind, they say. Sure, but dismissing a whisper in the Appalachians was considered unwise. Because occasionally, ignoring it had consequences. Trips gone wrong, livestock losses, and even disappearances. Flesh poor things. Here's where the folklore gets truly grim. Flesh poor things are spirits or entities that seem to embody misfortune itself. They don't have a detailed mythology, they exist to remind you of mortality. They are omnipresent, yet rarely seen. Associated with sickness, bad luck, and accidents. Known to target humans who ignore warnings or act arrogantly. Unlike Haints or Boo Hags, these things are the universe's way of enforcing humility. They are subtle. They don't chase you with fangs, they make sure every small misstep escalates. If you ignore them, your life becomes a series of minor disasters with perfectly timed precision. Etiquette in action. All of this leads to one key principle. Etiquette is survival. Respect the animals. Respect the mountains. Respect the signs. Respect the granny woman protocols. Fail at etiquette, and the folklore provides a chain of consequences. Ignore it, and the mountain will respond in ways humans are only beginning to understand, if at all. Remember, Appalachian folklore is not about dramatic ghosts or monsters for entertainment. It's about reading the signals correctly, interpreting patterns, and taking practical steps to survive in a world where the land itself is older than humanity and decidedly indifferent to your fate. Now that we've met Haints, Boo Hags, shapewalkers, and flesh poor things, it's time to talk about the practical side of dealing with them. Because in Appalachia, stories aren't just stories, they're survival instructions. And the instructions are often weird, specific, and borderline hilarious to outsiders. Salt, iron, and other survival tools. One of the most common recommendations across generations was salt. Not just sprinkled in food, mind you, salt lines across thresholds, salt under the bed, salt around livestock pens. The mountain, or whatever spirits inhabit it, apparently has a thing against sodium. Or maybe salt is just a useful way to create a barrier everyone can remember. Either way, it works, sometimes. Iron is another staple. Horseshoes, nails, knives. Apparently, the mountain and its entities are allergic to metal. Keep a piece of iron near a vulnerable spot, and trouble tends to stay away. Combined with salt, these tools form the basic toolkit of Appalachian defense. Inexpensive, portable, and endlessly multi-purpose. Herbs and teas. Mountain medicine. The grannies of Appalachia weren't fools. They were herbalists who understood plants better than most modern pharmacists. Willow bark for pain, basically natural aspirin. Sassafras for flavor, warmth, and possibly warding spirits. Ginseng for energy, stamina, and occasionally to impress your neighbor. Every plant had multiple roles, culinary, medicinal, and magical. Why choose one when a single leaf can do 3 jobs? Survival demanded efficiency, and Appalachian folk were masters of it. Dreams as warnings. Appalachian people took dreams seriously. Not, oh, a weird dream, seriously, but someone might die if you ignore this, seriously. Seeing water in your dream? It might indicate travel is dangerous. Dreaming of fire? Could be an illness coming. Seeing a black cat? Bad luck for the next few days. It wasn't superstition for fun. It was pattern recognition. Ancestors noticed. After this dream, bad things happened, and those warnings became codified. Ignoring them was asking for trouble. The importance of listening. Throughout Appalachia, listening is emphasized more than looking. The right sound at the right time can indicate danger, opportunity, or impending change. Listen to rivers for changes in flow or unusual sounds, animals for unusual behavior or vocalizations, wind patterns in hollers and ridges, crickets, frogs, and even the rustle of leaves. The people who survived in these mountains were keen listeners. They interpreted subtle cues and responded accordingly. Outsiders often dismiss these signals as paranoia. But in a world where a misstep can be fatal, careful attention is not paranoia, it's training. Respect over understanding. This is the fundamental Appalachian rule. You don't need to understand everything to survive. You only need to respect it. Respect the mountain, respect the animals, respect the signs, respect the old stories. Failure to respect these elements often led to inconvenience, illness, or death. That's the beauty and the terror of Appalachian folklore. It's pragmatic, and it works because it's grounded in hundreds of years of observation and consequence. Chapter 1 wrap up. So far, we've learned that Appalachian folklore is older, subtler, and more survival-oriented than most people realize. The mountains themselves are characters. Creatures, spirits, and haints enforce rules. Granny magic combines herbalism and ritual. Observing signs, listening carefully, and practicing etiquette can mean the difference between life and death. And through it all, one principle remains: survival is prioritized over explanation. The folklore doesn't need to make sense to outsiders. It needs to work for the people living in the shadow of ancient mountains that do not negotiate. Specific legends, odd rituals, and the things that go bump in the holler. Now that we've set the stage with general survival folklore, it's time to get specific. Because Appalachia isn't just Haints and Boo Hags. It's a wild ecosystem of highly localized myths, entities, and practices that make outsiders wonder if the mountains have a sense of humor, or a vendetta. The Mothman of the mountains. Yes, Appalachia gave us the famous Mothman. Not a Hollywood creation, this terrifying, winged humanoid allegedly prowls the hills, often seen before disasters. Sightings usually involve large, glowing red-eyed wings that stretch impossibly wide, movement too fast and erratic to be explained naturally. Locals didn't treat the Mothman like a monster to fight. They treated it as a warning system. If the Mothman appeared, take caution. A bridge might collapse, a fire might start, or someone you know could get hurt. The creature's existence isn't questioned, it's obeyed. Appalachian superstition teaches that it's better to be alive and cautious than clever and dead. Seeing the Mothman isn't an invitation for a selfie, it's a subtle, hey, pay attention, from the mountains themselves. Spearfinger and the Witch of the Finger. Another classic is Spearfinger, an old woman with a finger sharp enough to pierce stone. She's known to prey on children, shape-shift into neighbors, attack livestock and crops. Stories of Spearfinger weren't just horror tales, they were instructions. Children were taught to avoid strangers, suspicious strangers, and even their own imagination in certain places. Every detail of the legend reinforces survival skills. Don't wander alone, watch the unusual behavior, and always respect the warnings of elders. The Wampus cat. The Wampus cat is a shapeshifter, often described as a half-woman, half-cat creature that prowls the forest at night. Unlike other spirits, the Wampus cat has a very specific role, punishing wrongdoers and testing bravery. Folklore details include appearing as a large, cat-like silhouette on ridges, transforming into neighbors or friends to lure you off safe paths, acting as a natural enforcer of etiquette. The moral? Don't be foolish, don't trespass, and don't assume the forest is empty just because it's quiet. Moonshine, rituals, and protective measures. Some of the more amusing aspects of Appalachian survival involve practical ritual disguised as superstition. Examples: sprinkling salt around the cabin before a storm, hanging iron nails above doors to deter spirits, carrying a piece of moonshine during a night walk to appease restless haints. Yes, moonshine. Not just for drinking. The distilled spirits doubled as magical buffer and spiritual insurance. If a haint or witch attempted to meddle, the thought was that alcohol, faith, and adherence to tradition would create a protective shield. It's both hilarious and effective, a true Appalachian multi-tool. Animal guides and warnings. Animals often play the role of messenger or guardian. Pay attention to birds that mimic voices, deer that suddenly bolt for no apparent reason, dogs who howl at nothing, cats staring into the dark with unblinking intent. These behaviors weren't interpreted as coincidence. They were data points. Appalachians combined observation, memory, and superstition into a predictive model for survival. Think of it like, if this happens, take that action, or the mountain will remind you why it's older than your reasoning. Mountain whispers and sleep warning. Some of the creepiest stories involve mountain whispers, sounds that carry information across hollers. These whispers could indicate danger approaching, illness in the community. Spirits observing behavior. Ignoring these auditory signals was a mistake. Listening carefully, respecting the sounds, and responding appropriately was another layer of survival strategy. The takeaway: Appalachia teaches that all input from the environment is meaningful, and the people who survived longest were the ones who treated every anomaly as important. The Bell Witch of the Mountains. Another favorite tale involves the Bell Witch, which transcended simple ghost stories to become a regional obsession. While originating in Tennessee, the legend influenced Appalachian culture widely. The Bell Witch tormented the Bell family with noises, scratches, and physical attacks. Was intelligent enough to converse with victims, targeted specific family members, especially males of authority. Stories like these weren't purely for horror, they were behavioral lessons. The Bell Witch taught humility, respect for unseen forces, and adherence to proper etiquette. Mock or underestimate the unknown, and consequences escalate. Interestingly, the Bell Witch demonstrates how folklore combines psychological influence with natural hazards. Early settlers could easily attribute illness, crop failure, or livestock loss to spiritual interference, reinforcing respect for rules and tradition. The ghost light phenomenon. Appalachia is also famous for ghost lights, mysterious orbs appearing in remote valleys, creeks, and abandoned roads. Known regionally as spook lights or will-o'-the-wisps, these phenomena often act as warnings or guides. Follow a ghost light incorrectly? You might become lost. Misinterpret its direction? You could stumble into a dangerous hollow. Recognize it properly? It can guide you to safety. Modern science may suggest phosphorescent gases or swamp gas. Appalachians didn't need to explain it, they just treated it as meaningful input from the mountains. Observe carefully, interpret cautiously, and survive. Haunted hollers and abandoned homes. Some of the creepiest stories revolve around abandoned cabins, old mills, and hollowed-out homesteads. Spirits, residual energies, or curses often inhabit these spaces. Lessons include: avoid trespassing after sundown, always knock 3 times and respect the space, never take objects from the site. It wasn't fear-mongering, it was risk management. Misinterpretation of these haunted spaces could result in accidental injury, livestock disappearing, community strife or social consequences. In essence, folklore ensured social cohesion. Respecting others' property and sacred spaces was encoded into supernatural warnings. Rituals of passage. Appalachian communities often employed rituals to navigate dangerous or liminal periods. Examples: lighting candles on All Hallows' Eve to protect homes, walking around a field clockwise to ensure a good harvest, tying knots in a string to remember protective charms or tasks. These rituals reinforced caution, careful planning, and awareness of surroundings. Once again, the supernatural acts as a mechanism for safe behavior, not mere entertainment. The role of storytelling. Every myth served a dual purpose: education, teach newcomers, children, or travelers how to survive in a treacherous environment. Enforcement, ensure obedience to rules through fear, awe, or respect for tradition. Stories about witches, haints, or monstrous creatures weren't meant to scare for fun. They were social contracts with the mountains. Respect the patterns, follow the signs, and survive. Outsiders often dismiss these tales as quaint. But the survival rate among those who adhered to them was measurably higher than those who ignored them. Appalachians didn't need empirical studies. Generations of consequence provided enough evidence. Listening to the mountains. Finally, Appalachians understood something fundamental. The mountains are alive, the mountains communicate, the mountains reward caution and punish arrogance, whether it was through animal behavior, weather patterns, wind whispers, or other subtle signs. Those who learned to interpret the mountains survived. Those who didn't disappeared quietly, leaving stories and warnings for the next generation. This is the genius of Appalachian folklore. It's integrated environmental intelligence, transmitted orally, disguised as legend, superstition, and horror. And it works. The lurking shadows and night travelers. Some of the eeriest tales involve what locals call night travelers, entities or spirits that move silently through the hollers after sunset. These figures are rarely seen in full, but their presence is unmistakable. Footsteps where none should exist, rustling of leaves with no breeze, shadows that move against logic. The lesson here is straightforward. Avoid wandering alone at night. Locals don't embellish these warnings. They've learned over generations that observation plus obedience equals survival. People who ignore these guidelines often end up as cautionary tales. The Devil's Tramping Ground. Certain circular patches in the mountains, such as the infamous Devil's Tramping Ground in North Carolina, inspired local superstition. Legends say, anything left inside the circle disappears by morning. No vegetation grows within the circle. Animals avoid it instinctively. Stories like these served a purpose beyond spooking children. They were natural markers of danger, whether due to unstable soil, predator activity, or other hazards. The folklore ensured that everyone respected these areas, preventing accidental injury or worse. Cryptid sightings and shape-shifting beasts. Beyond Mothman and Wampus cat, Appalachia is full of reported cryptids and shape-shifters. Shadow wolves that vanish into thin air, foxes with glowing eyes that mimic human voices, large cats that seem impossible for the terrain to support. Locals didn't debate the plausibility. They treated each sighting as a signal. Misinterpret a shadow, and you risk to stumble, injury, or misadventure. The folklore operates on a simple principle: assume danger and prepare accordingly. The role of seasonal superstitions. Folklore also follows the rhythm of the seasons. Certain months or natural events trigger specific rules. Harvest season warns of restless spirits. Winter solstice rituals prevent illness and curses. Spring rains dictate planting protocols to avoid supernatural interference. This seasonal approach integrates survival with the supernatural. The stories remind people when to be cautious, when to act, and when to respect the unseen. In Appalachia, the calendar is as much spiritual as it is practical. Songs, rhymes, and oral cues. Songs and rhymes aren't just entertainment, they are survival codes. A lullaby might include instructions on which paths to avoid. A local tune could warn of specific predators or haints. Step light on the moss, lest the shadow cross. Don't whistle at night, the dark takes flight. These oral traditions embed survival knowledge into memory, ensuring it passes to the next generation. Forgetting a rhyme isn't just cultural loss, it's potentially dangerous. Ritual objects and talismans. Appalachian folk also employed tangible items to interact with the supernatural. Iron horseshoes above doors, knots tied in strings for protection, small charms made from herbs, bones, or stones. The logic is simple. Combine observation, ritual, and tangible tools to maximize survival chances. This is practical magic, not whimsical superstition. The items are symbols that focus attention, enforce rules, and ensure vigilance. Community reinforcement. Folklore is enforced collectively. One person's disregard for tradition could endanger the entire community. Stories of Haints, Boo Hags, or shadow travelers functioned as social glue, reinforcing obedience and mutual protection. The moral is obvious. Survival is a team effort, guided by stories that encode wisdom and caution. Chapter 2 Wrap up. Chapter 2 expands our understanding. Appalachian myths are deeply tied to environment, community, and observation. Every legend serves a dual purpose: ensure compliance with safety and etiquette, maintain awareness of subtle environmental and supernatural cues. The mountains themselves act as teachers, and the folklore is their curriculum. Obey, respect, and survive, or ignore and vanish quietly, leaving behind stories for the next generation. Odd rituals, curses, and the curious minds of the mountains. Welcome to Chapter 3, where things get delightfully strange. By now, we've covered the basics: Haints, Boo Hags, shapewalkers, mountain etiquette, and survival strategies disguised as folklore. Now it's time to dive into rituals, curses, and specific oddities that make Appalachia, well, Appalachia. Cursing without a lawyer. Appalachian curses are remarkably direct. No lawyer needed. No complex contract. Just follow the ritual and believe in the consequences. A typical curse might involve whispering your target's name over salt, placing a doll, bone, or personal object in a concealed location, saying a chant or rhyme in the dark. In the mountain, spirits or haints handle the rest. Notice something. These curses are rarely malicious for no reason, they are instructional. Don't disrespect property, family, or local wisdom, or someone will discreetly remind you that rules exist. In Appalachia, curses are less about revenge and more about enforcing etiquette. Spinning tales of the flesh poor. Flesh poor things are the subtle, passive-aggressive entities of Appalachia. They don't hunt you down. They make your tools disappear, ensure small accidents happen, give you restless nights. Basically, flesh poor things are the universe's way of saying, pay attention, idiot. Their effectiveness lies in subtlety. The less you notice, the worse the accumulation of minor disasters. The dance of the Haints. Sometimes Haints aren't just mischievous, they're theatrical. Stories describe Haints performing repetitive motions, like dancing or pacing, often in open spaces like abandoned fields or clearings. Locals don't attempt to interact. They watch, observe, and avoid. The lesson here is psychological. You're being monitored, and every misstep is noted. The dance is both warning and entertainment, reminding humans that the environment is aware and responsive. Seasonal rituals and protective practices. Seasonal awareness isn't just practical, it's spiritual. Examples include fall, candle placement on porches to ward off wandering spirits. Winter, protective knots and charms inside the home. Spring, field walking in clockwise circles to bless crops. Summer, avoiding certain hollows during lightning storms or droughts. Notice a pattern. Every ritual enforces observation, preparation, and caution. Superstition is simply a vehicle for environmental intelligence. Banshees, ghost whispers, and the human mind. Ghost whispers and banshee-like wails are commonly reported in remote hollers. They signal illness, misfortune, or impending death. Warn families to be vigilant. Influence travel and activity patterns. These phenomena are not random. They function as auditory risk assessment tools, guiding locals without modern science. Sleep-deprived, wary, and constantly observing the environment, Appalachian humans developed remarkable pattern recognition abilities. Herbalism meets the occult. Granny women were practical magicians. They knew which plants healed, which plants protected, which plants could curse. A single herb could serve multiple purposes. For instance, sage for purification, willow for healing, nightshade for minor curses, or maybe just pest control. The genius here is efficiency. Combine survival, healing, and supernatural protection in one plant. Outsiders might laugh, but these methods were effective. Community awareness. The Appalachian Mountains reinforced group survival. Folklore ensured everyone followed shared rules, recognized dangers, passed lessons to children. Stories acted as social contracts, transmitting both practical knowledge and ethical guidance. Ignore the wisdom, and consequences escalated subtly yet inexorably. Chapter 3 Preview. We've only scratched the surface. Next sections will explore specific curses with documented effectiveness, ghostly apparitions tied to historical events, odd rituals of protection that look absurd but work, the intersection of superstition, environment, and psychology. Appalachian folklore isn't decorative. It's a survival manual in narrative form, encoded in humor, fear, and observation. Curses that work. If you follow the rules in Appalachia, cursing isn't dramatic, it's formulaic. The folklore emphasizes precision. Use the correct ingredients: salt, iron, personal object, perform the ritual at the right time. Dusk, midnight, or specific moon phase. Speak the exact words, usually in rhyme or chant. Break any part of the protocol, and the curse fails. Follow it exactly, and the outcome is often surprisingly effective. It's less supernatural theatrics and more. If you follow these steps, nature, spirits will handle the rest. Some common curse scenarios included keeping a misbehaving neighbor in line, punishing thieves or vandals without confrontation, sending warnings to those who ignored social etiquette. Notice how social order, environmental awareness, and supernatural belief are intertwined. Appalachian culture didn't separate practical survival from spiritual caution, they were one and the same. Ghostly apparitions with purpose. Many Appalachian ghost stories involve apparitions that aren't just spooky, they communicate. Common behaviors. Appearing in the same location repeatedly, indicating where danger lies, revealing the location of hidden or lost objects. For example, a ghost might appear near a river bend to warn of a washed-out path. Another might appear near a homestead to signal a sick family member. These are functional narratives. They encode location-specific knowledge, keeping the community safe. Appalachians didn't need scientific explanations, they needed results. Ritual oddities that work. Some rituals appear utterly absurd to outsiders but are surprisingly practical. Placing knives under beds to ward off evil and prevent nightmares or trespassing animals. Knots in strings to track and protect crops. Hanging iron objects above doorways to protect livestock. The beauty of these practices is efficiency. They're symbolic, ritualized, and designed to focus attention. Humans become more cautious, observant, and methodical, precisely what survival in these mountains requires. The psychological angle. Modern psychologists would call much of Appalachian folklore pattern recognition under uncertainty. Locals observe anomalies, assign meaning, adjust behavior accordingly, whether the cause is supernatural or environmental. The outcome is the same: safer behavior. Fear, awe, and ritual are the tools, not the goals. This is why folklore persists. It works, even if no one fully understands why. Generations of trial, error, and storytelling distilled into usable knowledge. Animals as teachers. Animals in Appalachian lore are more than pets. They are messengers and enforcers. Birds mimicking voices serve as warnings. Deer acting strangely indicate predators or supernatural presence. Dogs and cats sometimes alert humans to danger before it becomes obvious. Once again, the lesson: observe carefully, interpret cautiously, act wisely. It's the same principle that underpins every Appalachian tale. Haunted landmarks and historical events. Many haunting legends tie into real historical events. Abandoned mines with restless spirits, fields where battles or skirmishes occurred, cabins of families struck by tragedy. These stories serve dual purposes. Maintain awareness of dangerous or unstable locations, instill respect for history, property, and the unknown. Its folklore as geo-historical risk management. Humans learn boundaries, dangers, and survival tactics through stories that are entertaining, horrifying, and instructional simultaneously. Chapter 3. Wrap up. By now, it should be clear. Appalachian folklore is pragmatic, environmental, and socially reinforced. Supernatural tales encode survival strategies, ritual, observation, and respect form the backbone of local wisdom. In the next chapter, we'll explore the most absurd and specific superstitions, local oddities, and haunting tales that define the culture, because it's time to get weird in the mountains. Absurd superstitions, haunted oddities, and mountain weirdness. Welcome to Chapter 4. By now, we've covered survival strategies, haints, boo hags, curses, and ritual. But the Appalachians were not above indulging in the delightfully absurd. Here we explore the odd, the whimsical, and the slightly terrifying superstitions that made life in the mountains interesting. The curse of the turnip head. Yes, there's a thing called the turnip head. In some regions, locals believed that leaving turnips out on your doorstep overnight could attract spirits, or conversely, repel them, depending on the moon's phase. Why turnips? Nobody is sure. Perhaps because they are both bland and stubborn. Placing turnips incorrectly could bring misfortune. Arranging them in specific patterns could bless a household. Eating a turnip at the wrong time could invite minor accidents. It's absurd, it's specific, and it works in the Appalachian worldview. Attention to small details equals survival. Hollow shadows and vanishing paths. Some stories describe areas where the forest shifts. Paths seem to move, hollows vanish, and familiar landmarks look off. Travelers who ignored local guidance often got lost. Step off the prescribed trail, and the path moves. Streams appear where none existed the day before. Trees and shadows obscure recognizable markers. These tales teach a simple lesson. Trust locals, and don't assume the forest is logical. Even if the mountains aren't literally moving, human perception and environmental hazards will punish arrogance. The whistling spirits. Some ghosts, or haints, depending on your preference, communicate by whistling. A seemingly innocuous tune could mean danger approaching, warning about wildlife, reminder to follow local etiquette. Ignoring the whistle is never recommended. In practice, it's a sophisticated auditory early warning system disguised as folklore. Outlanders hear a whistle and think, cute. Locals hear a warning and adjust behavior. Animal mimicry and shape-shifting. Oddities beyond normal animal behavior. Some creatures were thought to mimic human sounds. Foxes imitating voices, owls calling your name, crows signaling unseen events. This was not paranoia. Observing and interpreting these signals was an essential survival skill. The folklore emphasizes, assume the world communicates, even if cryptically. The moonlit road superstitions. Many superstitions center on roads at night. Avoid crossing bridges at midnight. Never whistle on a dark road. Step lightly on wooden planks, or spirits may follow. These rules sound strange, but in context, they're practical. Bridges were often unstable, roads treacherous, and shadows disorienting. Superstition encoded practical hazards into memorable, repeatable stories. Curious protective rituals. The mountains are full of charmingly specific protections. Hanging garlic to ward haints or illness. Placing small stones in patterns near the home. Carrying charms during long treks. Again, the combination is symbolic and functional. Humans are more alert when they believe danger exists, and the rituals reinforce vigilance. Appalachia understands. Psychology is part of survival. Absurd but effective etiquette. Some of the funniest traditions involve etiquette rules that seem ridiculous but serve a purpose. Don't point at the sky during storms. Don't step over a neighbor's threshold backward. Avoid whistling at animals after dusk. Laugh at them if you want. But these rituals reduce risk, enforce caution, and encode environmental awareness. They are folklore's version of, please follow the safety manual. Chapter 4 Preview. Next sections will cover specific absurdly detailed rituals that outsiders would never believe, local legends tied to historical events, superstitions about animals, weather, and unexplainable phenomena, practical lessons disguised as horror. Chapter 4 promises the weirdest and most entertaining stories yet. Buckle up. The mountains get stranger the deeper you go. The Gravelly Hill Curse. Some hollers have stories about the Gravelly Hill Curse. The legend goes like this. Walk the hill at night without proper ritual, like whistling avoidance or salt in your pocket. Stones supposedly shift underfoot, causing injuries or getting travelers lost. Some claim footsteps echo behind you. Even when you're alone, the lesson is obvious. Don't wander without respect for the mountain's rules. Absurd? Absolutely. Effective? Appalachian survivors would argue yes. Animal omens and odd advice. Animals in Appalachian lore aren't just messengers, they're auditors of behavior. Cats staring at walls. Watch your step tomorrow. Dogs barking at unseen figures? Don't take shortcuts. Deer running in unexpected directions? Something is amiss nearby. The advice is delivered with humor, storytelling flair, and a distinct lack of patience for skeptics. Ignore it, and you may quickly learn that animals are surprisingly good at predicting danger. Ghostly apparitions that teach. Some spirits appear specifically to correct behavior. For example, the specter of a lost child appears near a creek to warn others not to play too close to water. Ghostly farmers may appear near abandoned fields to teach proper crop etiquette. Haints showing up repeatedly indicate ignored patterns or disrespect. Notice the pattern? Folklore is less about frights and more about corrective education. Appalachians built survival mechanisms into narrative form, elegant, terrifying, and sometimes hilarious. Superstitions about weather. The mountains are full of weather-based warnings. Locals would say, if the whippoorwill sings thrice before dawn, prepare for storms. Fog rolling up the hollow at sunset signals restless spirits. Lightning striking twice on the ridge, stay indoors. It might sound like nonsense, but combining observation with superstition increased survival odds. The folklore works because it encodes natural patterns into memorable stories. Ridiculous but ritualistic protections. Some rituals are absurd in their specificity, but again, practicality is hidden in symbolism. Tying a red ribbon around a tree near the home prevents misfortune. Leaving a kettle of water on the porch overnight to trap spirits. Placing a knife across a windowsill to discourage hauntings. Absurd? Definitely. Effective? Perhaps. The Appalachian genius lies in using human psychology to enforce careful behavior. Haunted artifacts and objects. Items like furniture, tools, or heirlooms often carry superstitions. A rocking chair that moves on its own signals pending misfortune. Old clocks stopping at the precise moment of tragedy. Tools misplaced by unseen hands to teach respect for property. Folklore again reinforces attentiveness, obedience, and communal memory. Every story is a lesson, every warning is a rule. Chapter 4 wrap up. By now, it's clear. Appalachia excels at combining practical survival, psychology, and narrative flair. The mountains teach lessons through absurd superstitions, animal behavior, ghostly corrections, ritualistic protections. Folklore is not decoration, it's a living, breathing curriculum for surviving in a world where the mountains are older than humans, indifferent, and highly observant. Next chapter, we'll dive into the most bizarre, ridiculous, and horrifying tales of the mountains, including curses, disappearances, and rituals that will make you wonder if the mountains themselves are pranksters, or just brutally honest teachers. The most bizarre, absurd, and terrifying tales. Welcome to Chapter 5, the grand finale. By now, we've covered survival strategies, haints, rituals, animal messengers, and absurd superstitions. Now it's time for the stories that make Appalachia unforgettable. The tales that are equal parts hilarious, horrifying, and utterly absurd. The case of the disappearing herders. One of the most persistent legends involves shepherds and livestock herders who mysteriously vanish. Accounts often include Herding goats or cows along a familiar trail, hearing whispers or distant music, turning around to find no path back. The landscape seemingly changed. Locals treated these disappearances as cautionary tales. Never ignore the mountain's subtle warnings, always carry protective charms, and never underestimate the shifting hollows. Humorously, some versions claim the goats or cows themselves disappeared with the herders. Because even the animals follow folklore rules, apparently. The tale of the singing brook. Streams and brooks sometimes carry spirits, or at least, that's what locals say. A story tells of a brook that sings a tune at night. Anyone who tries to collect water without listening first suffers minor accidents. People who hum along with the tune are sometimes led astray, sometimes saved. Ignoring the song entirely results in confusion, lost items, or getting trapped in the forest. It's absurd, musical, and terrifyingly precise. Appalachians interpreted natural sounds as coded instructions. Obey or pay the price. The Hollow Walker. The Hollow Walker is a legendary figure said to traverse hollers silently, appearing only when humans are careless. Dressed in ragged clothing that blends with shadows, steals minor items, like tools or clothes, to teach lessons. Appears in dreams to warn about future missteps. The moral is consistent. The mountains, spirits, and rules are omnipresent. Ignore them, and you learn your lesson the hard way. Absurd rituals that somehow work. Some rituals seem ridiculous but have a practical layer. Spitting 3 times before crossing a bridge to ward off spirits. Tying a red cloth to a tree to ensure safe travel. Humming a specific tune to alert benevolent haints. At first glance, these are whimsical superstitions. Upon closer inspection, they encourage alertness, caution, and preparation. Every absurdity has a purpose. Animal omens. Revisited animals are again central to folklore. A fox appearing at the edge of a field? Don't enter. Deer running in unusual patterns? Check your surroundings. Owls calling at midnight? Take care when traveling. Appalachians didn't interpret these signs lightly. Each animal interaction was a data point in survival analysis, encoded into legends that entertained, educated, and warned simultaneously. The mountain's subtle humor. Perhaps the most delightful aspect of Appalachian folklore is its dry humor. The mountains, as it were, have a personality. They trick travelers with shifting paths. They punish minor arrogance with absurd mishaps. They reward humility with safety, protection, and odd blessings. The mountain's humor is not cruel, it's instructive. The folklore teaches that life is easier if you observe, obey, and respect the environment, and it does so with wit, charm, and occasional absurdity. Final lessons from the mountains. Observe carefully. Nothing is random in the mountains. Obey rituals and local wisdom. Even absurd practices have a function. Respect animals and spirits. They are messengers and enforcers. Learn through stories. Every tale contains embedded survival knowledge. Appalachian folklore is a masterclass in survival disguised as narrative. The absurd, the terrifying, and the whimsical all serve a practical purpose, ensuring humans live another day in a world ruled by ancient, indifferent mountains. Closing thoughts. If you followed along this far, congratulations. You've absorbed centuries of wisdom encoded in tales of haints, boo hags, singing brooks, hollow walkers, and absurd rituals. And the best part? You can enjoy it all safely, without stepping foot in a hollow, encountering a shapeshifter, or leaving a turnip in the wrong spot. Remember, the mountains don't negotiate. They don't explain. They simply exist. And through folklore, humans learn to navigate, survive, and occasionally chuckle at the absurdity of it all.